Our next brave speaker is the delightful Greg Edelmuth. When Greg was 19 years old, he was excited about what his future might hold. What he didn't expect was to be diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer of the lymphatic system. Today, Greg's life looks very different. He now lives with the understanding that there is immense power in having perspective, and it is through the hardest of challenges that we grow the most. Please put your hands together and welcome Greg.
No matter how many times I hear that introduction, it still feels like Lana's talking about someone else. My name's Greg Edelmuth. I actually attended the last Brave Talks. I was in the audience, like you, listening to stories from extraordinary people, feeling totally in awe and inspired. Their stories really had a profound impact on me. Afterwards, I wanted to share my own story because when I was 19, I had an experience and it completely changed me. So I wrote an email to JewishCare saying I was interested in speaking. Then I left that email in my outbox for 3 months. I just couldn't press send. I kept convincing myself I had nothing important to say, nothing inspiring or special enough, nothing worthy of a brave talk, nothing as extraordinary as those people I heard speak that night. The truth is, a big part of me still thinks I was just lucky, that I'm not extraordinary, because when I had cancer, I didn't think about being brave. I just did what I had to do. I was 19. I'd just been overseas, backpacking in Europe. I was thinking about my future, preparing to go to university. I cannot tell you how excited I was for what was ahead of me. I was so desperate to keep up with my friends. I needed to find my place, to feel like I belonged. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It all started with back pain. Trips to the physio, the chiro, from one specialist to another. I just assumed it would go away. We all did. But it didn't. It got worse. So much worse. Back pain became weight loss, night sweats, itchy scalp, and eventually repeated loss of feeling down my legs. Soon I could barely function at all. The pain was so intense. In February 2004, I went for a scan. That's when everything changed. Being 19, I didn't really know how to process what was happening. I remember meeting with my hematologist. He said that my tumor was growing aggressively and putting pressure against my spine. He said that if left untreated, I could be paralyzed in a couple of days. I'll let that sink in for a second. He told me I had diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was like I was listening to him speak another language, an aggressive form of cancer. He said I would need radiation and chemotherapy, and there would be a chance I may never be able to have children. He said it also clinically. I remember wanting him to reassure me that everything would be okay, the way a parent would do, but he couldn't or wouldn't. He tried smiling, probably because he was as nervous as me. I still think about this and how I wouldn't want to live a day in his shoes. During my treatment, I became nameless. I can still see it like it was yesterday. I was known as patient number 1229482, a number in a sterile system, a number that will never fade from my memory. The chemo was an experience that, to be honest, I still struggle to put into words. It's like they push your body to the absolute limit, killing everything and still keeping you alive. Just alive, it felt. I remember so clearly the nurses would wear these fluorescent purple protective suits because the chemicals they used were so toxic, the chemicals that went inside me. I remember after a lumbar puncture, where they inserted a needle into my spinal cord, my parents tried to move my body because I needed help. But the staff at the hospital said stop, because touching me could make them sick. Imagine that, being a parent and you can't touch your own child. I needed that touch. Despite everything, my parents were unwavering. They stayed strong. At least it seemed that way to me. Their strength gave me strength. I believed in their belief that I would be okay. Thinking back, I feel like the lucky one. Not because I survived, but because I wasn't them. It's hard to imagine how they shouldered the weight of my illness so that I could live as normal a life as possible. Meanwhile, around me, other patients were fighting their own battles. Most were many times my age. I feel like I wasn't meant to be there, like it wasn't my place or that I didn't belong. It felt so unfair. I was meant to be growing up with my friends. Speaking of, they were amazing. They all shaved their heads as a gesture of support. Sometimes there were too many to fit in the hospital room. Many of them are here supporting me tonight. Of course, when they left, I would be alone again, with an overwhelming feeling of uncertainty. More than any other feeling, uncertainty defined that time in my life. I learned how bottomless it can feel, how it keeps you awake at night and paralyzes you with the scariest of thoughts. My treatment took 7 months, which sounds like a short time, but to me it felt like a lifetime. Afterwards, I tried to pick up where I'd left off. I went to university, I got a job, I met my beautiful wife, and we had 2 beautiful boys. My hair grew back, briefly. 20 years went by, 20 years of ordinary life, except something was different. Actually, 2 things. First, ever since cancer, I feel like I can't take anything for granted, which is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I try my best to be grateful for even the most ordinary things. On the other hand, I feel haunted by the feeling that everything could just end. It's the same uncertainty. I'm learning that one can't exist without the other, that being grateful requires knowing how precious life is. But it's not easy. Well, at least I don't find it easy. Also, I still feel like I'm in the wrong place a lot of the time, like an imposter, completely out of my depth, not experienced enough, or worse, unworthy of being here at all. That feeling has never gone away. I feel it right now, as if it was standing next to me, telling me I'm not good enough or worthy enough of a brave talk. When I started preparing to talk tonight, I didn't know I'd be telling 2 stories. One about almost dying, about the strength of my parents and the strength of our community, who came together to keep me alive when I was just 19. And the other story, a story which has changed me for the better, a story about surviving, how surviving means learning to live with some basic fears, like the fear of uncertainty and the fear of not being good enough or extraordinary enough. Because if you learn to live with uncertainty, you can learn to be truly grateful for what you have. And if you learn to live with the fear of not being good enough, to be brave and to speak up, then you learn that anyone worth listening to feels the same. This has been such a defining aspect of what I've learnt, of what I'm still learning. Thank you.